Welcome, everybody. It is primary day, election 2018 in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm Josh Fenton. Welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Joining me today is State Representative John Lombardi, former mayor of Providence, municipal judge in the city of Providence, former city council president, former city councilman. Weren't you the ambassador to the Vatican at one point during your career?
I think some other mayor or something, but it's state representative.
Yeah, that's right, state representative. It is primary day, and we're starting to get the sense that this may not be exactly what we expected it to be. It is, going on 3 o'clock in Providence. It is raining at a good clip. Numbers coming out of a number of communities show very, very depressed voter turnout in this primary. And if it holds true, it could be record low turnout in the primary, despite the massive spend by Governor Raimondo. What's your take on no enthusiasm?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely not. And this weather is certainly creating a pall on everything. I mean, look, Representative Regenberg has identified several voters over the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Many progressives feel that, that their seats, out there ready to be taken. I think those people that are going to be voting for Representative Regenberg and some of in the local races, may opt to go with Brown. And I think that governor's race is tightening up. And obviously, she is probably going to spend about $2 million in the primary. Which is an inordinate amount of money, but it just may be enough, and it may not be enough to keep the gods off her.
It's unheard of. I mean, you take a look at it, we've functionally zero unemployment, whether it's a state economy or regional economy or national economy. An incumbent with $8 million total raised in the cycle. Zero unemployment, ought to be flying to re-election. Governor Baker in Massachusetts is being endorsed by half the Democratic mayors in the state, jumping over and endorsing a Republican. What's the disconnect here that Matt Brown, who hasn't really been in the state in a dozen years, and it hasn't raised any significant money? Gosh, there's probably reps who have more. There is.
Yes.
Joe Sicarchi's raised more money than Matt Brown.
That's correct.
What's the disconnect that she can't connect and he's able to pick up some momentum regardless of how this turns out?
Yeah, it just seems like people want change. If that's what it is, if he's an agent of change, she may not be. Don't forget, everybody forgets, she's been in office 8 years.
Yeah, right.
So she has an 8-year record. A lot of people forget that. And, with the term limits, which is only 8 years, the people that she hobnobs with, look, I support her, so I don't have a problem with that, but we need to be realistic. I don't know if she has the ground troops. I think, that progressive movement, I think is more for the regular guy or the regular woman. And I think that's what they're looking at. I mean, you saw, like what happened to General Assembly, especially on the House side, towards the end, with the women's issues and equal pay. I mean, people are very upset out there. They just want change. I went to a debate last night in my neighborhood. Many progressives, probably 125 people there. They're talking about change. They're talking about change. Now, if they get out there, if they get out to vote, I think you're going to see some you're going to see some surprises.
So some of the numbers we're getting, Pawtucket, as of about 11 o'clock this morning, only 1,600 people had voted in either the Democrat or the Republican primary. In contrast, in 2014, which wasn't the biggest turnout statewide primary year, 8,200. So even if you say that 11 o'clock a.m. and increase it by 1.5%, you're not even going to come close to the turnout in 2014. Are folks exhausted by politics? Is that part of this? This is unending Trumpism, unending conflict, lack of enthusiasm?
I mean, there's saturation. I mean, I was on my listening on my radio as I was coming over. I heard 3 gubernatorial commercials.
Yeah.
Spencer Dickinson. I mean, it's like, I think it's a little late, but
yeah,
and then we were inundated with mail. I mean, in the last 4 days, I probably received 13 pieces of mail. In some instances, 2 for the same candidate locally. So it's oversaturation. People are just going, you know what? If I think this is political, I'm throwing it in the garbage, and I'm just going, if I'm going to go vote. and this weather is not a great impetus to get out there.
Yeah, at least the numbers we're hearing, Pawtucket, Cumberland, low turnout, and Woonsocket, not good numbers for Dan McKee, who's counting on a big, big turnout in northern Rhode Island to offset Aaron Ruggemer's.
Sure,
Yeah.
the problem.
Let's go to your district. You were fortunate enough or so unbeatable that you did not attract an opponent in the Democratic primary. But overlapping your district is the Senate district that probably is the most contentious Senate district fight in this Democratic primary, or certainly one of them, and it's longtime incumbent Paul Jabor against Audiello and Sam Bell. What's that race? They've all been on in the past, on GoLocal Live in the past week or so. What's that race looking like now?
Well, again, the weather's, I think, creating a little bit of havoc, but what we need to keep note of, Josh, is 529 mail ballots.
Yeah.
And I think, that race may come down to the mail, but I mean, from what we're seeing internally, and obviously I'm supporting Paul. Paul's a dear friend of mine. We're getting our identified voters out, our ones out. We want the turnout to be small. At the Twin Towers, I call Parentiville and Dominica Manor, there's about 440 votes and maybe about 220, 240 apiece.
Yeah.
So, and I figure there'll be like 320 maybe by the end of the day, so it'll be about 620, maybe 700. I don't know what Aaron Briggs is going to hold. Usually that's a very big poll, but I know they were less than the Twin Towers. But what was very high was the Water Supply Board. But you have the council race there, and you have the rep race there. That's very contentious.
And is that good news? Is that over at Water Supply? Is that good news for Paul Jabor? Is that a worrisome note?
Well, I think that's good news because he has family there. I know he's worked Mount Pleasant very, very hard, probably harder than he worked Federal Hill proper. So I hope it's good news, but again, he's a hard worker. He worked every day, he walked every day, he never took his suit off. I used to tell him, Paul, you got to relax, but listen, he's a hard worker, he's dedicated to this, and he will prevail at the end of the day.
We ran a piece today of things to look at, maybe some of the facts that you didn't know. We talked about it a little earlier on air, Kate and I. In 1990, Bruce Sundlun beat Frank Flaherty and Joe Palina. Between the three of them, and they collected about 170,000 votes in that Democratic primary. So not only was it that core, probably 120,000 Democratic votes, but also about 50,000 independents came over and voted in there. We could have a vote this year under 100,000.
Absolutely.
Why are folks so dissatisfied?
They're desensitized, they're oversaturated. I mean, it's every word that you can think of. I mean, you're 100% correct, and some. It just, people are tired of it. A little bit of this, what's going on in Washington, this bickering back and forth, some of the things that are happening locally. I'm telling you, people are just saying, enough now. I don't want to hear it. You guys are all crooks. I mean, I got to tell you, I must receive 15 to 20 calls a week. I mean, I see it on my TV. Guess what? If it's anything I don't recognize, I'm never going to pick it up. Same thing on my cell phone. And I'm sure you're going through the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all are. And it's too much. It's redundant, over redundant, plus redundant. So it's going to stop.
Redundant at infinity.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's jump over to the GOP side. Alan Fung was expected to win this primary, but again, low turnout. Looking at some data, in 1992, the heavily favored J. Michael Levesque, who was the sitting mayor of West Warwick at the time when they had a mayoral structure. He had been GOP chairman, very well liked, affable guy, had good relationships within the party. He gets upset. He only gets 6,000 votes in the Republican primary, gets upset by Betty Leonard, who owned a car dealership in Rhode Island. She only gets about 8,000 votes, less than 15,000 votes cast. Are we looking at the potential of an extremely low GOP turnout, in part because sitting on the sideline is Joe Trillo, who's got a basket of Trump voters with him, and he's holding them for the general election. Are we going to see a very significant depressed Republican turnout as well?
Oh, absolutely. Again, the weather. I would say that the Republican voter, maybe people that are a little older, a little more secure in their life, in the sense of, they're a little conservative. And this weather, again, they may be hit over the head with the club too many times. I mean, leave us alone. And you're right. I mean, and by the way, I don't count Pat Morgan out.
No.
I think that she put some rubber on the road. And
the last couple of weeks, I didn't think she ran the best campaign over the last year. But she had the best 2 weeks closing of any of the candidates in the entire state. She de facto created a perception that she got endorsed by Arlene Violet, Ken Block, and John Robitaille, all pretty popular people amongst Republican primary voters. Now, I think only Arlene Violet actually endorsed her, but the perception was all these different investigations that she was going to take on once she becomes governor, that she had announced that would involve all these folks. And I think she got a lot of momentum out of it.
I totally agree. She would receive an endorsement from South Carolina, John Robitaille.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
I mean, that's the long arm of the law. I mean, no, seriously.
He's more worried about the hurricane than he is about the Republican primary here in Rhode
Absolutely, but you never know. You never know, right? But yeah, and there's another X factor in the general election. That's Dr. Nunes. I think he's going to get some votes. I mean, I met him last. I could be dead wrong, but I think there'll be some ethnic voting for him, and again, people that want change. I think that if it's Patricia Morgan, Brown, Trillo, and him, he may not do too bad.
Yeah. No, listen, it's going to be another wild card. Let's go to the Providence mayoral race. Listen, you look long and hard at running for mayor of Providence. You've run in the past. You held the position as mayor on the interim basis after Buddy Cianci was forced to resign, and held the position until there was a special election. Your polling by Zogby pointed out that sitting mayor Jorge Elorza has some weaknesses in some core areas, especially amongst and interesting Latino voters. Let's first talk about the primary and then talk about the general. In the primary, we've had Bob DeRobio, who's a well-respected educator, but wasn't a high-energy candidate for mayor, and Kobe Dennis, who was a high-energy candidate but had no infrastructure and couldn't raise any money. Do those two? You're anticipating Jorge Elorza to win the primary today. Do those two put any nicks in his armor that sets up problems for him in the general?
I heard someone texted me today. They said that Bob DeRobio had 2,400 mail ballots. Well, if he's got 2,400 mail ballots out of, say, a possible 5,000, and those two gentlemen together get, let's say, 42-43% of the vote. Well, that may spell a little problem for the incumbent. And then, obviously, we're going to talk about the general election. But so, I mean, the problem with the mayor is that he does not communicate well. It's his way or the highway. And he's not like he goes to events now. He never has a tie on, never has a sport coat. Never, he's got his shirt sleeves rolled up. I don't know what that is. I think certain events you need to be dressed up, dressed apart. Be the mayor, you need to be the executive branch of government, and he does not speak out on issues. When there's a crisis, he's hiding. I don't know why he does not work well with the Providence delegation. I could tell you that as a state representative. So I don't know where he's going, but let's have this conversation at 8:01 tonight. I think we'll have a better view.
Idea.
I mean, if he wins 70% of the vote, then it may be irrelevant.
Dee Dee Whitman jumped in at the very last second, well known, especially on the east side, prominent in the east side Jewish community, well known amongst politicos. She's been a tremendous fundraiser for a host of different candidates on the Democratic and even Republican side.
And independent.
And independent. Well known, well liked, well respected. She's tough, she's feisty. And she's thrown $500,000 on the table, and reports are that some significant players are looking to raise her some money. So she's going to flatten things out relative to. You've seen the polling. You're as involved as any elected official is in the community. Is that a race?
Well, it could be. Again, I think after tonight you'll see if I mean, if the mayor, happens to win big and, embraces Bob DeRobio, embraces Kobe Bryant, Kobe Dennis rather, and, it may be fait accompli. I mean, I think that's the problem with Dee Dee. How is she going to play in the minority community?
Yeah.
We don't know. We just
Right.
don't know. Does she have any ties to that community? I mean, we know she'll do well on the east side. She'll do well with women voters. I just don't know about the minority, and that's the big X factor for me.
Up at the State House, Maura Walsh is tweeting today that Speaker Mattiello has his entire staff working up on Smith Hill, trying to defeat her. They've put a lot of time, energy, and some money behind Michael Earnhardt, who she claims is a Trump 2.0 type of candidate. What's going to happen up there? You go back 2 years ago, she upset Tommy Pelangio. Tommy Pelangio had not really campaigned. He'd been sick. It was a very, very low turnout. I want to say 600 total votes.
Just about, that's right.
Yeah. And what do you see going on up there?
Well, I mean, I happen to like Representative Walsh. I think she's a straight shooter. She's not afraid to say what's on her mind.
No, that is definitely true.
That's I think she pulled some scabs off and kind of hurt. But no, it wouldn't surprise me that she's not a yes person. She's not anybody's person other than the people of her district. I know she's working very hard. She's indicated to me that she's identified several hundred ones. Ones
Yeah.
are people are going to tend to vote for her. I think there's about 170 to 200 mail ballots. I think she's saying she's doing very well with them. I mean, if that's true. And I know how hard she works. I think she'll prevail. But you're right. I mean, the last time, I think she won by 40 votes, 50 votes. There was about 600 votes that were cast. So,
right.
I mean, that tells you that they must have voted less than 10% there.
Yeah.
Now, with this weather, I think it helps her.
Yeah, right. It's really who can go and drag folks
Sure,
out.
sure.
We've both been involved in races in this city that have big turnouts and small turnouts.
Sure,
And
sure.
some of them catch fire, and you don't have to worry about getting anybody out. You just need to get a majority of them.
Sure.
The speaker's been under criticism, especially by progressives. Maura Walsh maybe being the most frenetic. I mean, the day doesn't go by that she's not tweaking the Speaker of the House with a tweet of some kind. Are we going to see a more complex leadership battle as the session begins? He's got a very tough race. He only beat Steve Frias 2 years ago by 85 votes. And paper ballots were the key to that. He's lost some of those key people. Jeff Britt's no longer with them. The unions have said they're not going to support him the way they did because of his lack of help on the POSOX deal. First of all, let's go with part one. Does he beat Steve Frias?
That's a good call. I know his supporters are saying that they don't need the mail ballots, that they're going to win. There's no Trump factor this time. There's less voters. He's identified his votes. He feels he can get them out. It's you're right though. I mean, there are some bad feelings amongst his group. And some of his operatives are not with him. I'm not saying they're opposed to him. I don't know that, but they're certainly not with him. And is there some jockeying going on? The answer is yes, but it's so undercover that you need James Bond to find it. So.
We see some of the.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, we see some of them just going down to Cersei for lunch sometimes. So
exactly,
yeah.
I'm sure.
You in the past have expressed interest in being Speaker of the House. I don't think that's any secret. I think that's been uttered publicly in the past few years.
People have asked me. They've asked me a majority leader. I mean, look. I think we could span the bridges in there if we had a different kind of leadership. But look, it's all about rule changes. It's all about, maybe term limits. I mean, but people about communicating with them. You make a commitment. So, for example, my friend Carol McEntee, there was a commitment made to her. Last minute, it was pulled. You know, equal pay, and you know, and the equal pay was one for Donovan, and for Carol McAtee was the, you know, extending the statute of limitations with regard
On
to
sexual abuse,
sexual
which
abuse,
has
yeah.
subsequently become a national issue with the
Amen.
grand jury
It's
report
it's like
coming out
hashtag
of.
Me Too.
Yeah.
It's a it's a world issue. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
a national, it's world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, the Pope is being criticized. Even our own bishop is taking a shot at the Pope. So it's a big issue. And you know what? You make the commitment, you have to keep your commitment. That's what leadership does. Apparently, it's, you know, it's, again, their way or the highway. And you're hearing people that are in chair positions, especially many of the women reps in the room, saying, we don't care about the chairmanship, or we don't care about the title that we have. Now, again, let's talk January 1.
Yeah, that's right, right. When the
You know how
actual
that works.
votes, right,
Yeah.
right. There's usually more voted commitments than there are actually members of the House of
And
Representatives.
that's, I mean, you know,
Right.
there is rumor that, you know, at least one person wants to run for a speaker against them. You know, until that happens, then we'll see.
Let's wrap up. Will we see a big surprise? Will Matt Brown beat Gina Raimondo? Will Aaron Ruggenberg beat Dan McKee? Will Patricia Morgan beat Fung? Are we now headed in a direction with this weather, with this low turnout, that any of those things could happen?
Well, there's the conventional way of thinking that would say you're absolutely wrong on all three.
Yeah.
That all three will lose. However, if the progressives have done what they claim they've been trying to do for the past 2 years, if you believe what happened with Capuano and the councilwoman from
Yeah.
Boston, I mean, that was very telling.
Right.
If that's the way...
Capuano was
Yeah.
up 13
Exactly.
points 3 weeks beforehand, and it wasn't close.
No.
No, he got beat.
But
hands
here's the
down.
thing. I think people are so disgusted that they're on a line to try and skew the polls. And you know what, you can't blame them, because again, every 5 minutes you're getting a call. And then you're watching TV, there's 4 Gina Raimondo commercials, you know, 1 Matt Brown, you know, Regenberg, you know. So it's,
Well, if we're comparing Gina Raimondo and Matt Brown's, there's 27
Well,
Gina
that's
Raimondos
true.
and 1
I'm
Matt
sorry,
Brown.
I
Yeah.
stand corrected, maybe 30.
Yeah, that's right.
But so nothing would surprise me either way. If the 3 win, it wouldn't surprise. If the 3 lose, it wouldn't surprise me. And again, I'm saying that the turnout's going to be so low, I don't know if it's going to make much of a difference.
I will say this, though, probably the biggest surprise of the entire campaign is how traditional a race Gina Raimondo's campaign has run. It has been a TV-oriented, old-school race. We really haven't seen that. You know, Obama sort of shattered that model going back in 2008, going very digital, especially email strategy. Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton with a Facebook strategy driven. Sure. And now we've kind of gone back. Gina Raimondo's campaign is buying 30-second spots on Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy and trying to lock in that older TV,
Sure.
you know, very stable 65
those
plus
are the people
voters.
that vote.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they're, and I'm saying that's where the progressives may benefit, that the weather being so inclement, that many of those people may not leave. You know,
Yeah.
who's got arthritis, who's, you know, whatever.
Right.
They just may not come out.
I want to thank you for coming on.
Well, the pleasure's all
and,
mine, sir.
look forward to hearing your comments a little later this evening. We'll be reaching out to you. It has been wild and woolly all day. The text messages have been blowing up by the second. I'm going to be right back in about 30 seconds with former Congressman Bob Wagan. He's a unique person who has the perspective of both serving up in the leadership in the State House as well as serving in Congress, and ran for United States Senate. So we'll be right back in about 30 seconds with Congressman Wagan.